Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. Let us begin by acknowledging our presence on treaty lands rich in history and traditions of First Nations. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the New Credit for their stewardship of this historic territory. I now invite everyone to rise and join Council in O Canada. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, we have regrets from Councillor Robinson, and everybody else is here. And Councillor Lapworth. Lean back. You're right. He's not there. And Councillor Chisholm. Oh, my goodness. Well, someday I'll be able to see that those seats. So the hardy, the few, the hardy, we're here. Are there declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I'd like to declare pecuniary interest on item number 7 of the Administrative Services Committee agenda. This is with respect to the Bronte BIA. I am Kerr Street. I just want to be in Bronte. But I love Kerr Street too. I have a pecuniary interest because I'm a corporate member of the Kerr Street, K-E-R-R, BIA, and as such I have potential interest and would like to be absented from the vote.
All right, thank you, Councillor Knoll. And Council, I'm going to make one more effort to get this right. The confirmation of minutes of the previous council meetings. You've had a chance to review the minutes of April 3rd, April 18th, and the confidential minutes of April 18th. And are you satisfied with those minutes? Councillor Adams is moving them. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hutchins, all in favor? And the minutes are confirmed. We now have a public presentation from Patricia McCarney, who's the CEO of the World Council on City Data. And we have certified for ISO Platinum certification, and that's a big deal. Patricia, are you ready? If you come to the podium, I understand that Ms. McCarney may have slides. Just a few. So there's a presentation and a certification and some slides.
Thank you very much, Mayor Burton, councillors and staff and guests. It's really an honor to be here this evening to present the Platinum Award to the city or the town of Oakville from the World Council on City Data. As you know, and many of you are familiar, ISO is a really quite rigorous process for many towns and cities to go through to become certified, but to be platinum certified is of course the highest level of award, which means Oakville has committed to has a commitment to high caliber data for cities worldwide. The WCCD, just as a bit of background, was established in 2014, so we're relatively new. We passed an ISO standard. It's the first ISO standard on city indicators. The idea is to have apples-to-apples standardized data for the first time where cities can actually be measuring the same things across standardized methodologies and definitions. So Oakville's certified data is now available on the WCCD Open Data Portal called dataforcities.org, where it can be compared with cities from around the world on this standardized data with high caliber data. The data is actually independently verified as well, so it's quite a rigorous process once the city commits to becoming certified. So ISO 37120, a little bit of background on that, is the first ISO standard ever developed for cities. It's certainly the first standard ever developed for standardized data for cities. We developed 100 indicators across 17 themes. The 17 themes include all the usual things that cities prefer to measure, such as mobility, safety, waste management, water, economy, governance, etc. So the 100 indicators, when a city reports between 90 and 100 of those indicators and it's third-party verified as correct, the award of platinum certification is given. And I must say that this went very quickly for Oakville. The data was really amazing and available, and the staff did a tremendous job in compiling this data in such a short time for the verification. So the data is across, as I mentioned, these 17 themes. And what we like to say at the WCCD is once a city adopts a culture of data, it's actually building a culture of innovation in cities, because all of a sudden lessons can start to travel city to city. So just in Canada alone, for example, Vaughan and Cambridge and Toronto and many cities are entering this certification process. Globally, we have many cities across many different countries and continents. So we have London in the UK, for example, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, already certified. Dubai is certified. Shanghai is certified. Johannesburg, Buenos Aires. So Oakville's certification level of platinum, now that data is up on an open data portal with comparability for the first time to cities all across the world, which is an incredible feat, because we know that data becomes a tool for lessons to travel and innovation to happen in cities. I thought I'd just show you a couple of the slides. So for example, number of higher ed degrees per 100,000 population. You can see how high Oakville scores on this relative to other cities globally. And as cities worldwide begin to compete globally, one of the most attractive places for investment and foreign direct investment is often based on the talent of the town or city. So of course, this particular data point is really quite a powerful message for Oakville to take globally in terms of attracting, for example, foreign direct investment. It is one of the highest, with 52,000 higher ed degrees per 100,000 population. That means about 1 in 2 citizens in your town has a higher ed degree. This is extremely high on a global basis, and it's really an important message, I think, for your economic development and planning officials. I'll just go through the last two. There's another one that Oakville really stands out on relative to other cities, especially right around the Toronto area, such as Toronto and Cambridge and Vaughan. Oakville being one of the most efficient in terms of electricity and energy use per capita. And then finally, on bicycle paths, I was surprised, because I know that the Dutch cities, such as Eindhoven, Erlen, Rotterdam, and others, really do pride themselves on bike lanes. But in fact, Oakville's right up there with the Dutch cities that are always bragging on the global stage about the bike lane. So this was another important data point. So I wanted to just close by saying I can't congratulate you enough on this tremendous work, and the staff, my own staff who are here, James Batava and Sahifa, worked very hard as backstopping to your own staff who are here. I think Mary is away, but Jane is here Maureen, Aruba, Michelle, amongst others on your team that put this data together with our team. I want to congratulate them. And on behalf of the WCCD, I would like to commend the dedication of Mayor Burton, the Town Council, and all of our staff here with this incredible commitment to open, standardized, and comparable city data, which will help to increase the quality of life for all citizens while driving evidence-based decision-making and data-driven solutions in the town of Oakville. Oakville stands out in Canada on all of the data points that we've mentioned and many more. There were almost over 90 of them that we looked at. And globally, also as a leader in working to create a more smart, a more sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and prosperous future for your residents. So Mayor Burton, congratulations. I would like to now present the certification to you.
Council and I are very impressed with our staff on a day-in, day-out basis, but on occasions like this, when we receive international recognition, it's an opportunity to thank you yet again for your outstanding caliber and your efforts. And who knew that when you pass this test, you get so fancy a certificate? This is the very pretty thing indeed. So thank you one and all. So we now have delegations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 delegations on a matter. I think they're all on item 5 of community services, which is the updated private tree protection bylaw. And Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
The first delegation is Marsha Maynard.
Welcome, Ms. Maynard.
Thank you
Council
very
looks forward to your information, and right here at the center.
I appreciate that. Thank you for listening. I'm an Oakville citizen. I lived here since I was 2 and a homeowner, and I'm also a frontline forestry worker. So I am the person that people call when they have concern with their trees. And my concern is that 9 out of 10 people that have called me in the last month or so have no idea about this bylaw. I have the arduous task of walking them through what they can anticipate. My concern is that a lot of the feedback is that they're quite irritated by this. So I feel that, and I'm formally asking that the town councillors and mayor not sign the bylaw number 2017-038 today until they have taken a moment to, with certainty, to show that public have been made aware and are part of this process. And that the proposed changes should be, like the fee structure should be included in July's tax mailing so that they can properly budget for this expense. And we will show that this expense can come close to, or in some cases even exceed, what your property taxes could be. So this is a significant line item as a homeowner that I would need to budget for. I'd like to also have council and the mayor and forestry understand that as an industry, we want to work together with you to build a bylaw that we can be proud of and that will make and continue to help Oakville be as beautiful as it is. So we're talking beautiful canopy, we're suggesting higher caliper trees, not cheap Home Depot cedars that this current bylaw would allow homeowners to substitute. So Ottawa has a great bylaw, and I draw the council attention to page 145 of the different municipalities, and this was in the agenda for last Monday's meeting. They actually allow for, and may I just read it? The number of replacement trees to be determined by the manager, being forestry, or approving body, and depends on the situation. And we feel that this item is so important to the new bylaw because, as we will show, there are situations that would make this process price prohibitive to the point where I might not be able to identify and deal with an issue on my property that could become a safety issue. The genesis, as referred to in the supporting material for the proposed bylaw, is that the data shows or attempts to show that we're losing 1% of our canopy. And that is the genesis, meaning the reason, the whole pivotal point for this new bylaw. I am concerned because of the data, as you see here on page 87 of Appendix B, indicates 6,300 trees that have been removed between 2012 and 2016. This data is not separated from developers who would also use a notification process. And under this current bylaw, these developers are not subject to these expensive fees, nor do they have to replant if the trees on the property fall within the footprint of the proposed development. So as Oakville taxpayers, we'd like to see, and there is development, everybody knows our land is our most valuable asset right now, that these developers have to abide by the same rules and regulations as the homeowners. And let's get the developers to participate in this building of this tree fund that all Oakvillians can stand behind. I know the community lives in Oakville, and I know that you are aware that this bylaw was coming. And I would suggest that perhaps you were able to take a look around your yard and see if there was anything of issue or that would be swept with this development. And maybe you took a moment to think about how you would proceed. And I think that the Oakville public is due that as well. I'm also concerned about the budget. I want to know, and I have twofold reason. I want to know that forestry is going to be able to implement this program and police this program. I noticed on line item, the first tree between 15 centimeters and 24 centimeters, they've only estimated a revenue of $8,450. There are almost 200,000, with a population of 200,000 and almost 64,000 homes, 640,000 homes. How can we only anticipate that 169 trees between 15 and 24 centimeters will be considered for removal? I am anticipating that it will be much, much higher. So being a frontline forestry worker, a lot of people call me with a great deal of remorse, and they've given a great deal of thought to removing their trees before even calling me. They may have to deal with canopy coverage, which is extremely complicated, and there's a calculation template here. So if they are expected to replant numerous trees on a property that's already 20% canopy coverage, they're going to be forced to do cash in lieu. And in the town councilors, or in the bylaw itself, it says that there's a provision for facing financial hardship. And I would suggest, as we will show here tonight, that a lot of us would be facing financial hardship if we were dealing with the scenarios that we will show in terms of how this will impact or the actual permit and replanting fee costs will be. So we would like to know, how do we apply for this exemption? Because I'm suggesting that a great deal of the population would be facing financial hardship. I had a call today from Vincent LaRue, a client of ours, and he is here in the room. Thank you for coming. He had some very good ideas. He said that he feels this bylaw penalizes owners of properties that have been shouldered much of the canopy protection load. He'd like to see a limit to permit fees. And he'd like to see a per-case review of replacement conditions, exactly as I suggested that they undertake in Ottawa. And it allows for, as we mentioned last Monday, that gray area that needs interpretation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your information. Are there questions? Councillor Dudek, and I'll then come across.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. You seem to focus on the Ottawa tree bylaw, and I just want to know if you've done additional research in regards to if they apply to the director or the staff person who makes the decision. Is there an appeal process by which they can appeal a decision?
I think that's a great idea. If they don't, they should.
No, I'm just asking.
Yes.
Because that's yet another step.
Yes.
And do they stipulate what the criteria is that he bases his decision on?
They're saying that they are an approving body and it depends on the situation. So if they're brought to a site where they see a numerous poplar trees that are a fast-growing tree that residents, if left unchecked, can grow at a dramatic rate in a period of 5 years, and the calculation is, or even a cedar hedge, for example, if we were to remove a cedar hedge, in the cost example, it's close to $10,000, close to $10,000. So having a provision where somebody can come out and have a subjective, like, it just makes sense.
Okay, I guess my concern is you're alluding that there is that subjective, and what I'm asking is, what is the criteria? Because it's one thing to say, okay, it's up to that person's discretion.
Yes.
But then you've also got to play the devil's advocate and
Of
say,
course.
okay, so what is he basing his decision on? You cited a fast-growing species.
Yes.
Is it the amount of trees that are already on the particular?
Sure. Your documents suggest that 20% is the canopy coverage. And a lot of the concerns I had today was where are they going to plant these additional trees? So I agree. It should be subjective, and it should be, and we trust forestry. Forestry can make that decision. Okay, you're welcome.
Who else along this side? I'll go to the end. Councillor O'Meara, and then is it Councillor Hutchins next? All right, so Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Maynard, for
Thank you, Sean.
coming and attending council. It's always important to hear all sides of the story, and I can sense the passion in your voice and in your husband,
Thanks.
Rob, and what you guys do. I do appreciate that. So I just want to be clear, because I'm going to have some follow-up questions for staff after. Leading off of Councillor Duddick's questions, if there was some sort of criteria where there was more of a scale, or there was some decisions being made based on the health of a tree, is that what you were looking for? I mean, that's what you were pointing to in the Ottawa case. A manager would decide, and that would be based on either health and safety. Is that what the criteria or the subjectiveness is based on?
That would make sense.
Okay, so that's an important part. The next part is that developers do their fair share in terms of covering the canopy. That was the second part that I was hearing from you. That was an important part of this. Is that correct?
We'd like to see developers fall under the regulation that's being proposed for Oakville homeowners.
Okay.
And they're not, this bylaw as it's written does not. It excludes them. And the majority of the public are in support of the bylaw because they want to go after the developers. But when they're told that the developers are not regulated under this bylaw, that's when they get very irritated.
Well, that's perfect. We might have another area where it's covered, so that's why I just wanted to be clear about,
Yes.
just because it's not in here doesn't mean that it's not
We'd
somewhere
like
else.
to see them planting some trees and
Sure.
shouldering the burden that the taxpayers are being asked in this bylaw.
And then the last point, I just wanted to be I wanted to get some clarification on. You seem to mention twice the 20% canopy coverage on a lot.
Yes.
If that were to be increased, is that something you would be happy with?
Your own publications suggest that residential only be 20%.
I know, but it's clearly something you have an issue with then.
No, I don't have an issue with that. What I'm saying is a lot of people, when people call me and say, where am I going to put these new trees? And I said, well, there's a cash in lieu opportunity that will contribute to a forestry fund. And there's no cap on that. And the replacement tree for every 10 centimeters is by far the highest of any of the bylaws. So Appendix A indicates that the trees to be removed, if it's a 60 centimeter tree, then it's 6 trees. If it's a 30 centimeter tree, then it's very close to 3 trees. So it's a tree for every 10 centimeters. And I know the public doesn't understand how to measure trees. It should be in inches as well. The communication it's very confusing, even for those that tried to find it online today to measure trees, found it very difficult. So we have an opportunity to work together. We know some stuff because this is our industry and we are in the front line, and we want to have a bylaw that we can be proud of, that we can present it to people, they understand and they get behind. It's a good PR thing. To push something through that you're going to have resistance just seems counterintuitive to me if we truly want to improve the canopy in Oakville.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I will have some questions of staff when the time's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hutchins?
Thank you very much, and very much appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Thanks for having me again.
I had just one question. You were mentioning that people were worried about not having enough area to plant these extra trees when they cut down a larger tree. Were you aware that you can approach the town to ask them, and they will provide sites where you can contribute to the town's trees population?
I was hoping that there was something like that, because when I was on the Toronto bylaw website today, it says request a free tree, and you simply click it. So that is an important part of this picture. But I feel that we all understand that trees are important. Oakvillians are not dumb. They get it. They've been spending hundreds, I'd say millions of dollars in landscape that haven't been calculated in this canopy loss. It's not there. So this to me seems like Oakville has chosen this charity tree planting, which I think is great. indicative to the name of the town. But don't you think people, when they're talking $300 cash in lieu, and I may owe you 6 trees very quickly, don't you think I should be able to choose a charity of my choice? So I just feel that the prices are exorbitant.
Well, it's not $300 per tree. If you are asked to plant 6 trees because you've cut down a 60-centimeter tree,
Correct.
you can buy, I mean, we specify the height and the size of the tree you can purchase from anywhere. And I mean, I've planted trees all over the world, and
Yes.
you can go to the local stores and pick up some. Okay, I stand corrected.
And we don't want the cheap Home Depot cedars because they're $24 and that's what everyone is going to try to make happen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're here for questions and information, not for debate. I remind everybody. Councillor Elgar, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you coming and actually putting up the overheads you did. I shared your concern with regard to the 6,300 trees, and I think you were at the committee meeting, and staff did answer that question, and in fact, they stated that 70% of the 6,300 trees were actually from private ownership.
70%?
70% is what I heard them. I hope I'm correct on that, but that's what I heard.
But that would still skew the 1% canopy loss by 30%. And my concern is that the millions of dollars that Oakvillians have spent on landscaping have not been captured in this report. So I feel that 1% is a stretch.
Well, I can't confirm or deny. All I know is that of the 6,300 trees, and I was
Yes.
shocked also to learn
Yes.
that in fact it was all from the 70% were from private ownership, not from the development industry, which shocked
So they
me.
should have separated the numbers.
Yeah, it would have helped, I
Yes.
agree. But they did separate it for our clarification
Okay.
at the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. And thanks for coming out again. You spoke several times at CSC, I recall. You didn't mention that you were a frontline arborist. I'm not familiar with that term. What landscaping company do you work with?
I own Storybook Tree Services.
Okay. All right. Very good. And you've mentioned several times that you're concerned about the fact that developers can do whatever they want with this bylaw.
Within the footprint of the new proposed build,
Okay.
if the trees fall within the footprint.
But you've read the bylaw as proposed that we have in front of us.
I believe I did.
Okay. Because, well, let me throw another question.
Yes,
out. Are you
please.
familiar with our site plan bylaw?
Yes.
All right, well, 5F mentions and separates developers
Yes.
from this bylaw because we are a little bit harsher on developers and new builds. In fact, we are separating this for the purpose of satisfying a condition to the approval of site plan, plan of subdivision, plan of condominium, or acting under sections, and there's a bunch of different sections. So we actually have a whole different set of bylaws not contained here that are a little bit harsh on our development industry to make sure that they maintain our tree canopy. So would
They're not harsher.
they're not?
No.
But you're not familiar with the site plan bylaw, you'd said.
I am.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So what's
So
the
when an
difference?
arborist report is presented, it lists the trees and their identifying number that fall within the footprint. They are allowed as soon as they're given the green light to remove, and they're not required to replant.
They are actually.
How?
Well, I'm not going to get into debate here, and I
Counselor-
see the mayor stopping me from doing that. So,
Sure.
Nevertheless, there are things under the site plan bylaw, which you should probably familiar yourself
Yes.
with, that provides for that. Also, I understand you, again, did have several times to speak on last Monday. I believe you got answers for most of the questions you raised tonight. I assume that you're not pleased with the answers you received?
I spoke once, and my concern was the gray area. that the Oakville taxpayers are due that subjective of which you alluded to. They need the ability to have that. Sorry.
No problem. And forgive me for saying several times, it was a bit of a
Yes.
chaotic meeting, and
Yeah.
people were sitting down and getting back up and talking again, so.
It's okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, is there a next? Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Maynard, you indicated you're a frontline forestry worker. I'm interested in knowing, with the calls that you get, the percentage that are related to safety issues versus aesthetics.
I would suggest that the safety issues, people don't understand what is safe and what is not safe. So they call us to their site to help interpret that. So a great deal of the calls are of concern for safety. And then when we arrive, we indicate that pruning would satisfy the issue. They don't need to remove the tree. And that we've done an aerial inspection. And in terms of the other calls, we get a lot of neighbor disputes with overhanging branches or pine needles dropping in pools and burning out pool pumps. I could go on. Yeah, it really is. Everyone calls with great intent. Nobody's sinister wanting to remove a tree because they don't like trees.
Councillor, are you satisfied? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Michael Boulanger.
Mr. Boulanger, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Burton and councillors. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Michael Boulanger. I'm a lifelong Oakville resident, like Marsha. I've lived here all my life. I love this community. I think it's a great place to live, and I plan on staying here for the remainder of my life. I'm also an ISA certified arborist, a forestry technician, and the owner of a company called Wildwood Tree Services, which has been operating out of Oakville for over 20 years. The reason I'm presenting to council tonight is my main purpose is because I feel the fees that are involved with the bylaw are too high. I've got a quick presentation. I don't think it's going to take too long, and I'd be happy to answer any questions afterwards. Firstly, I'd like to start with a small petition that we've got from 9 of the local arborist companies. I've got 20 copies. I'd like to present it to council if I could, please. The petition just basically states that we are opposed to the bylaw. We would like it to be under further review. We feel that we haven't been consulted as a professional group over this bylaw properly, and we would like some time for that to take place before the bylaw is voted on. The next thing I'd like to show you is a couple examples of how the bylaw will affect the average resident in Oakville. I've got a PowerPoint presentation here. The first example you'll see is located with one of my customers up in the River Oaks area. Oops. There we go. I put the Schedule A chart on the left so we can, for easy reference here. So the first breakdown, this gentleman here, I'll give you a little bit of background quickly on the situation. This resident is located on a corner lot in River Oaks. The reason he wants to take down these 2 blue spruce trees is because they've basically taken over his corner lot of his property. He doesn't have much of a backyard, and he would like some lawn for his children to run around and play. So he was proposing to put a fence on the corner here to block the students from walking across, and he wants to take down these two trees. They are healthy, but again, he planted them 33 years ago, and he feels that it's time that they come down because they've outgrown their space. So I've broken down the bylaw, how would it affect this situation. So the first blue spruce tree is 38 centimeter DBH. So my understanding of the new proposed bylaw would be that there's a $50 first permit fee involved. The replanting, sorry, I should mention that this gentleman, because of the lack of space on his property, again, which Marsha alluded to earlier, does not want to plant any more trees on his property. He shouldn't have planted these trees in the first place, and he feels that he doesn't want to plant any more trees. So because these trees, if you go between 38 and 44 centimeters, he would have to pay, give the city 4 trees in replacement, which is a $300 value per tree. So that's where you get the $1,200 with the $1,250. The second tree is a very similar situation. The difference here is that every other permit fee in this proposed bylaw is $325 with no cap. So the second fee would be $1,525. So for a total, for this gentleman to remove the 2 blue spruce trees on his property, which he planted, I must make reference to that, 33 years ago, would cost this gentleman $2,775 before he even put a chainsaw to these trees. That's example number 1. The next example, this is common, I see this all the time in my industry, 20 years. This cedar hedge is located down in southeast Oakville, actually on Melvin Road, backs onto the Cornwall Road sound barrier wall. The problem with this cedar hedge is it seems quite healthy, it's a pretty healthy hedge, but it was planted 25 feet out from the wall. So this gentleman's issue is that half of his backyard is basically taken up by the cedar hedge. So his position is he wants to remove the hedge and replant a new hedge right up tight against the wall so he can enjoy his property. So this is an extreme example, but I've seen this happen over 20 years in my career in forestry, probably at least 20 times. So the first tree, again, $50, and then after that, he's going to pay. And this gentleman is willing to replant the tree, so there's no replanting fee for this gentleman. But the issue is that he's going to pay $325 times 33 trees because that's the hedgerow. So a total of $10,725 would be the permitting fee alone, not including replanting, to remove this cedar hedge, which again was planted by this homeowner. And I think the main reason why I'm here is in my opinion, this bylaw needs to have a cap. There needs to be a cap on the amount of the permitting fees that can be assessed, because there are certain species, and we need to be subjective about this, which I believe that council, there's been no proposal for this in the proposal that there is a cap on this. And if we don't put a cap on it, like Ms. Maynard said, that there's going to be astronomical fees for some people. Another instance would be if you had a row of poplar trees or Norway maples that grew up along your fence line, 15 centimeters, it's a small tree, it's not much. You could be in huge fees. I guess the next thing I want to refer to is 2 capital projects. I'm sure council is very aware of them. This is the Oakville Arena, great development project. 66 trees were removed on this property by the town of Oakville. Mature trees, beautiful trees. You can see what the site looked like before. That's the area in the dotted area where the trees were removed. The next capital project I'd like to refer to, my company actually cleared these trees for the town of Oakville. You can see on the left, there was 72 mature trees. That's just a small stretch. This is the widening of Cornwall Road between Morrison Road and Chartwell Road, north side. So 72 mature trees were taken down there. And I guess the reason why I'm showing these photos is I'm not trying to condone the town for doing this. I'm all for the advancement of the town and the beautification of the town. The Oakville Arena project is going to be a beautiful project. There's going to be lots of new trees planted there. Same with Cornwall Road. The road needs to be widened. I guess my point is that sometimes, unfortunately, trees need to be removed. And that's just part of life. And if we go around punishing the residents of Oakville economically with these exorbitant fees, I think we're going the wrong way about it. A couple last points here. I came up with a hybrid law, just throwing it out there. 2 tree allowance per calendar year, 20 to 76 dBH, which is currently in use, very similar to what's happening in Mississauga right now. The minimum size for regulation, I feel, should be left at 20 centimeters. 15 centimeters is too small. I mean, you've got trees that sucker up in 1 year that are 15 centimeters and cost extreme amounts of money for residents. Permitting fees need to be capped. We cannot have 33 permits for residents out there. It's just too much money for the general public. This is after tax dollars we're talking about, and as Marsha mentioned, that's some people's tax bills. Planting requirements, I feel, should be a minimum of 45 millimeter caliper. I know that the forester has recommended that we We try and make it easy for the people, but like Marsha said, I've been doing this a long time, over 20 years. I've seen what Home Depot cedars look like, and that's what's gonna end up happening. We've talked about it as a group of arborists. The problem with these trees is they're brought in from Oregon, BC, in shipping containers or shipped in cargo trucks across the country. They get here, they look great. They see one winter in this country with the dry wind, in a different zone, and they all die. We're gonna have a shortage of 30-millimeter trees. That's a very small tree. I know it's very convenient for the homeowner to plant them, but we want something substantial. Who's gonna be assured that these trees are looked after? I know there's gonna be some deposits, but I mean, if we're planting junk, we're gonna get junk at the end of the day, is my opinion. Lastly, I just would like to conclude with, one more point I'd like to make is, quickly, is I wasn't aware of, I guess, Councillor, you mentioned that the number, the canopy loss is 1% that we're rating towards the notification form. I wasn't aware of that chart, and no one had told me. I had actually sent Mr. Mark an email last week and Mr. Hashemi to find out if the public planting had been included in those numbers of canopy replacement. I'm happy to hear that it has been. So, lastly, I'd like to say, in my opinion, working in Oakville for the past 20 years, the threat to the town canopy is not the residents. The permit fees that some homeowners will be expected to pay for the removal of unwanted trees are extremely high. This needs to be addressed before council votes on this bylaw tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boulanger, for your information. I've got several questions for you. None over here. Councillor Grant and then Councillor Elgar.
Thank you, and thank you for coming back and providing some new examples. One thing that kind of strikes me is that you've mentioned that we should probably put off passing this bylaw until a little bit later. You'd also mentioned during our CSC meeting that you've had a number of calls recently from people wanting to clear cut their lot because they're afraid that this new bylaw might harshly penalize them. Do you see that there might be a concern then that if we don't pass this, we're going to have months and months of people then clear cutting their property?
There's great concern about that, but it goes to show you the reason why people don't want the bylaw, so they're trying to get ahead of it. People don't want to pay these fees, so they're moving forward and being proactive. I think that's the response you're getting from the public, and it's very clear.
And we'd heard that the town had spent 2 years consulting with the public and talking to them. We understand that the landscapers have not had a chance to converse yet, but we had been told that would be later this month.
Right.
And given that you do have a number of concerns, and combined with the fact that we need to get something in place so people don't go a little bit mad, don't you think that the best solution then is for us to at least pass this bylaw and then go ahead and talk to the landscapers later? This isn't, a bylaw is nothing that's written in, let's say, oak.
Yeah, I agree. The answer is no. I mean, as arborists, I feel that as a community of professionals, certified arborists, foresters in this community, we should have been consulted. We, like Marsha said, we are the front lines to this situation. No one ever consulted any of us.
That's because they wanted to consult you in May.
Well, that's a little too late, don't you think?
Again, we're getting into
After the
debate,
bylaw's passed, I think that's way too late.
and we're not going to get any conversation from the public on this. Nevertheless, we won't get into debate, but I think that the concern here is that we're going to lose much more of our tree canopy if we just sit on our hands and wait until after 2 years of consultation, everything goes away. And the thing too is that this isn't written in stone yet. I mean, or written in oak, let's say. Once we talk to, I believe, or make you be aware of the fact that we still have an opportunity to alter the bylaw once we have a conversation with the arborists.
In my opinion, I feel that's too little too late.
Into to a question at the last minute.
Thank you for framing that last one as a question. You had me doubting that you could do it, but you did it. Thank you. Councillor Elgar, your turn.
Thank you for coming to tonight and also to CSC last week. You mentioned, as you're speaking tonight, that some trees can grow to 15 centimeters in 1 year. What kind of a tree could we plant that'll grow to 15 centimeters?
A poplar could sprout up and be 15 centimeters when they're in the right conditions within a full growing season, with a good growing season.
If they're what size would the poplar be planted at?
Well, a lot of times poplar, if you cut down a poplar tree, a lot of times they will sucker up off the root system along the way. So if a poplar tree was cut down in a neighboring yard, sometimes you will get what's called suckers to grow right out of the ground, and they can grow tremendously fast.
Yeah, I'm not sure that fast, but anyway, I agree, they're like a weed.
Well, there should also be a provision for some of these invasive species too. The only provision that's in the bylaws for buckthorn. I mean, poplars could be on there, willows could be on there, Norway maples could be on there. Some of these trees are invasive species. And in fact, the city of Burlington has classified all these trees, and the conservation of Halton have classified all these trees as invasive species, and they're encouraging that they be removed on people's properties.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I don't disagree. Now, the other night at the CSC meeting, one of the gentlemen got up and spoke about a tree that was cut down. And did you know that exactly that it was your company that he was talking about?
Yes, I was aware of that. And
You
there was a
were.
lot of detail that wasn't provided in that scenario.
But there was no, was there did you have a permit on the
There was no
Friday?
permit needed because it was, the tree branches had broken over top of the road and were split.
Okay, but you did get a permit, though,
There was no permit, we just went in and removed the hazard for the weekend.
for the weekend? And then
Yes.
on the Monday morning, you got a permit then?
No, the tree wasn't taken down until the council was informed of it, and everyone was made aware, and then we were permitted to take the tree down at that point. There was an application applied for the permit, but the tree was not removed or intended to be removed. The broken branches that were hanging out over the road were the only portion of that tree that were removed.
Okay, because that didn't come across the other
No,
night
it
at
was, no, it didn't.
all. Okay, but at the end of the day, when the tree was, there's nothing left but a stump, you did have a permit, or didn't you?
Well, there wasn't, that wasn't the case. There was a lot more left than the stump. There was, the other half of the tree was still growing up over the other house and the driveway. The
Right.
portion over the road was which was removed.
Okay, because that's not what it wasn't what we heard anyway.
Right,
I
no.
appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Listino?
Mr. Boulanger, could you also comment on the safety versus aesthetics in your experience percentage-wise?
Yeah, it's very hard to have an imminent risk tree in this industry because, like Mr. Hashemi mentioned in the meeting on Monday night, you have to take into consideration a target and the risk of the tree, and it's a matrix that is put in, and it's almost it's so rare that a tree is imminent risk. It actually has to be failing, or uprooting, or some serious failure. So a lot of times the track system, which is the classification used by the ISA to determine whether a tree is actually of imminent risk, is a very hard classification to meet in the matrix.
And how often would you say in your experience that you counsel residents about them wanting to remove a really valuable tree in the sense of canopy that...
I mean, I probably see 20 to 25 residents in Oakville every day for quotes, and maybe 5 out of 10 of those people want to remove nice trees. I mean, we're not just out there killing trees. Let's be clear. We're trying to maintain the canopy as well. Sometimes people make the decision to remove a tree, like the town makes decision to remove trees at Oakville Arena and on Cornwall Road. It's part of life.
Thank you very much for your information, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Louella Brace.
Mrs. Brace, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. I have a copy for the clerk. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. A glorious opportunity has been missed, I think, because there's a better way that would get more trees and get them faster, more diversified, and importantly, keep residents happy and make them very proud. John McNeil of the town's forestry department, I found out, stated a few years ago excuse me, that public relations are a crucial part of plans to save the urban forest, and I couldn't agree more. I think that the current bylaw is perhaps too lax. It is too lax. And I will speak later about the proposed one. But equally important, I think, is making the purpose of any change in policy crystal clear. I submit to you that the goal of increasing the tree canopy is excellent and admirable. However, I wonder if the draconian how, the big stick that has been referred to by the previous speakers, the big stick model has maybe overtaken and dwarfed the original purpose of growing the tree canopy. I would like to present to you another way, the carrot model. The premise now becomes, how can we increase the tree canopy while maintaining good public relations and making both even better? And here's where it gets exciting, using carrots. The carrot model. This year is Canada's 150th birthday year. What better way for Oakvillians to celebrate than to plant a tree? After all, our town is even named after one. Oakville, as of 2011 census figures, had private properties, houses, duplexes, townhouses, row houses of about approximately 62,000. If even half jumped on this idea, the town would instantly have 30,000 new trees. This would be a town effort and a family effort. It would motivate families to visit nurseries and parks, and children would learn that there's more to planting a tree than just shoving it in the ground. Parents could teach them about the light patterns in their own yards, sun watering and soil requirements for different tree species, different ecoclimates within their own yards and why, and characteristics of different tree species and size expectations, and why it might suit their yard or their needs. Let the parents teach their children also that whatever they plant in their yard will impact their neighbors, and good neighbors inform their neighbors of changes that they are contemplating. It would be nice if somehow this could be incorporated into the new bylaw. It would prevent a lot of problems. What marvelous things parents can teach their children, who in turn will pass these insights along to their children. And most importantly, it is something families can do together and have fun doing as they move towards the goal of planting a new birthday tree together this year. Children who are Boy Scouts or Girl Guides will have a field day with this, as will children at school show and tell events. Invite our homeowners to plant a tree this year to celebrate Canada's 150th birthday, and by extension, to make Oakville the most livable town in Canada. Invite them however way you wish, but hopefully include it in the next tax bill, which will arrive before July 1st. Or if they can't do this, perhaps they could send out personal invitations. To make it easier, include a list of Canadian tree species. After all, this is Canada, and it's Canada's 150th birthday. Let trees be big or small, and by this I don't mean little small cedars that have already been alluded to, but small versions of the species that are mentioned, because very often the small ones will take faster than if they're bigger when they're planted. This will guarantee that they don't all die at the same time, as well as ensure increased diversity. Let the town advise them that before the end of the year, Oakville will host a celebration in the solarium to celebrate our fantastic increase to the town's tree canopy and to honor our wonderful homeowners who planted a piece of living history on their property. This could be combined with the mayor's levy. Let the invitation advise that a book will be produced by the town containing a picture of their new tree or trees and type, as well as family name, to be called The Family Trees of Oakville, 2017, to be revisited in 50 years with a sequel book showing these trees on our 200th anniversary in 2067. This will guarantee the best of care for each fledgling tree planted this year. My husband and I planted some 50 trees in the provinces in which we lived, and I will plant one more tree this year to celebrate Canada's 150th. I challenge the mayor and all mayors of council and staff to lead by example and plant a tree or trees on their property this year. This will inspire every homemaker to follow suit. One tree at a time, as we always have, we will build our tree canopy together. Are you up to the challenge? Will you meet this opportunity? I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryce. Questions? Thank you, Ms. Bryce, for your information.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Catherine Cavasalis, past president of the Oakville Horticultural Society.
Welcome, Mrs. Cavasalis. Council looks forward to your information.
1 second. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's a great pleasure to be here representing Oakville Horticultural Society. Just for those of you who don't know, Oakville Horticultural Society is a not-for-profit organization that reports to the Ministry of Agriculture. We're mandated under the Horticultural Act to promote the care of and culture of plants, and of course trees are large plants. Part of our very complex mandate is to promote tree planting, and I really like your idea, Mrs. Bryce, and I hope to come forward with a similar proposal to town to get the community to plant more trees. But our mandate is also for the protection of the environment and of course, thank you, to sustain our canopy. In response to some of the delegations this evening, we have been at this process for more than a decade. It was probably 11 years ago when I first started on this journey to try and create a private tree bylaw. There has been extensive meetings with the public and invitations for the public to participate in this process over that long period of time. The first round of creating this bylaw, the mayor invited myself and a number of people on both sides of this argument to sit down together and to try and craft a bylaw. What we came up with was a compromise. What was eventually passed was even weaker than that compromise, but when we sat down to do that, we made the decision to come back and revisit it after data was collecting. You, as members of council, when we first started this process, and there are some nice new faces on council, and you have probably not been inundated with the reams of documents that I sent council a decade ago, with all of the research that has been done to give you the benefits of trees. They are immensely important. For the 385 million years that trees have been on this planet, they have established the life support system around us. They are critically important. And so when we're talking about trees, we tend to, as private citizens, think of our trees as sort of lawn ornaments and kind of disposable things that we can change. And we neglect to see that it is the mature trees that do the greatest service to this community. A lot of the really important research that was done by our forestry department, and I have to compliment the town of Oakville for doing this, was to try and quantify some of that values, to look at the energy savings that come from mature trees, to see that they provide more than shade and beauty, but they also remove particulate matter from the air. They remove ozone. They remove all sorts of nasty things that we don't want our children breathing. They help clean the water. They prevent water from getting down, sediments from getting down into the waterways and reduce water pollution. These have all real quantifiable values. And these are the kinds of things that you are weighing against sort of the interests of property rights, private property rights, which are very real, of arborist profits and their ability to make a living, and the cost of administering a bylaw. All of these things are very important, but there is a great weight of evidence that trees have, and particularly mature trees. So when I looked at the examples this evening given of those 2 blue spruces that somebody says, no, I'd really like to have lawn, or a very mature cedar hedge and saying, no, I'd like a little more backyard space. I do understand that feeling. I have made mistakes in my property as well over the time. But then I understand that those mature trees that are now 20 feet, 30 feet tall are providing some of these ecosystem services that are so critical. When you take them down, you've all of a sudden removed habitat, you've removed biodiversity, you've removed pollution abatement. You have done a lot of things. Your neighbor has maybe lost shade, they've lost the wind abatement. These are pretty critical things that you need to weigh, and they do have real costs associated with them. So this is what you're weighing. It's those interests, and they are real interests, against the broader interests of the community. As a member of a society that advocates for tree protection and protection of the environment, I do favor the improvement of this bylaw. Because what we saw when you came back and you did the growing livability report and you looked at the urban forest, there was a decline in the canopy. Some of this had to do with emerald ash borer, for which we have very little we can do about. But a lot of this had to do with loss due to people taking trees down, be it developers and be it on private properties. And this is no small number. When the canopy has decreased and the numbers were given, it is worse than those numbers portray, because it said, well, Oakville added 167,000 trees overall. Well, in fact, 192,000 of those were European buckthorn, which means that overall the canopy has diminished. It's diminished because holes that were vacated have been taken over by invasive species. So it is really critically important that we get this right, that we really help the public to see that it is their responsibility to care for the trees on their property, and to recognize that there is a cost to all of us if they take them down. So I'm asking you tonight to go forward. I know these corrections aren't perfect. I can see that there are issues that are going to have to be wrinkled out. But again, it is another step forward. It has taken us a decade to make this little step forward. And I'd like you not to stop at this point and say, oh, we have to consider this a little bit more. Yes, you consider it more. Let's do a step forward. Let's reevaluate and continue to improve it. This is an iterative process. We aren't going to get it perfect, but we need to keep moving forward and keep improving our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your information. Are there questions for Mrs. Kavasilis? Councillor Elger.
Catherine, what was the number of buckthorns you said?
The number is 197,000 and change that has arisen, and we lost 100. We gained. The report said, we've gained 167,000 tree species, but as I said, those tree species, if you look further on in the report, 197,000 were reported to be European buckthorn.
And we've lost, 180,000 trees due to the emerald ash borer?
Yes.
Thanks very much for
You're
your
very
presentation.
Welcome. Thank you for your information.
Thank you very much, sir.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Bob Laughlin, board member of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association.
Welcome, Mr. Laughlin. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Laughlin. I live on Lakeshore Road East in Oakville, and I'm a member of the board of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association. I'm here this evening to urge council to approve and enact the bylaw 2017-38 to strengthen the existing private tree preservation bylaw. I think Councillor Grant has underestimated the period of consultation that's gone into this process. I have notes going back to 2013 of meetings with staff and other residents associations, and many of those meetings were attended by arborists. So it's a little surprising to me to hear that the arborists didn't know anything about this. As I say, the meetings we had were certainly well represented by, arborists were very well represented. Since the beginning of 2017, the number of trees taken down under the current notification process has doubled over the same period in 2016. Of the total loss of canopy over the 5 years of 2012 to 2016, 3% was associated with trees that were taken down under permit. 97% of that canopy came down under the notification process, We have to get beyond the notification process. Since they've accelerated this year, we can't afford to wait another day to eliminate this provision. So I would request that you approve and enact the bylaw tonight so notification ceases tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Laughlin. You've generated a question or perhaps an expression of gratitude from Councillor Grant. I'm not sure. Councillor Grant?
Well, being named, I thought I should respond, and I have to phrase this as a question. You might not be aware that, or are you aware, when I'd mentioned the period of discussion, the 2 years, that's actually for the latest iteration of the bylaw. And with great respect to the landscapers who are here, and knowing the great respect that our town staff has, I look forward to the discussions they have in May. And I hope certainly, oh God, a question. Anyways, I'll just keep going and before the mayor cuts me off. How do you feel about the fact that the arborists and the landscapers will have a chance to discuss this with the town staff further?
I think it's wonderful. I mean, all laws should be living laws that should be reconsidered on time-by-time basis as appropriate.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hutchins.
Yes, thank you for coming. You've heard from the arborists saying that the fees were exorbitant. Do you have any comments about that?
They have to be at a level that is at least gives pause for thought about whether that tree should really come down. So whether 325 is exactly the right number, I don't know, but it should be of some significance, certainly. If we need to put in a bulk discount for things like the cedar hedge, maybe that's appropriate. But it really does need to be, in my opinion, to be at a level that gives pause for thought about taking down a tree. The fact that so much of our canopy loss has been associated with the notification process, which required nothing at all, and no review by forestry department of the town, is very significant to me. At least if we have this permitting process, the discussion can take place. And I don't think we'll be down to only losing 3% of the canopy, but maybe we're down to only losing 50% of what we lost between 2012 and 2016.
So basically your position, as I understand it, is that you want the fee to be significant enough that people will think very carefully about how they put their pool in. Maybe they move it over a little bit to keep this bigger tree still alive because it's going to cost, and so on. So exactly. They will think of before they cut things down.
Exactly right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more? Mr. Rockland, thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Karen Brock, President of Oakville Green.
Ms. Brock, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
I went paperless today because it's Arbor Day. Happy Arbor Day. First of all, my name is Karen Brock of Oakville Green. I do have something written by Dr. Casimiri. She was unable to be here tonight because she has a very sick child. So I wondered if I could read her short statement first. Dear Mayor, Oakville Green is supportive of the town developing a strong suite of policies and regulatory mechanisms to ensure that our urban forest is protected, enhanced, and valued. Oakville's updated private tree protection bylaw is an important policy contributor to achieving our town's corporate strategic goals and our urban forest covered targets. In the last 8 years, as a result of the exemptions in the current tree bylaw, more than 1% of Oakville's tree canopy has been lost. Many healthy trees have been removed, and most private trees have been removed without any replanting or compensation. As most of Oakville's tree canopy, approximately 57%, is found on privately owned lands, a stronger private tree conservation bylaw is absolutely critical to retaining and enhancing our tree canopy cover in Oakville for all of its various social, ecological, economic services and benefits. Oakville Green supports the updated bylaw presented to Council on April 24th, 2017. Specifically, we support changing the definition of a regulated tree to a tree with a DBH, or a diameter at breast height of 15 centimeters or greater, removing the notification process completely and subjecting all regulated trees to a permit process, standardizing the requirement for planting of replacement trees, and public signage required for permits, and revised definition of emergency work and emergency work exemptions. Among these proposed changes, the regulation of all trees 15 centimeters or greater and the removal of the notification process are absolutely critical. The data related to the performance of the current private tree protection bylaw 2008-156 demonstrates that as a result of the notification process provision allowing for free trees to be removed annually, the current private tree bylaw is contributing to Oakville's tree canopy cover declining. So we're actually having a net loss with the canopy, with the protection in place so far. A permit process for every regulated tree allows staff to advise landowners about other options for tree care, to permit tree removals when they are justified, and to ensure that canopy cover loss due to approved removals is replaced. Reasonable exemptions identified in the bylaw ensure landowners continue to have some flexibility. Oakville Green and our volunteers have and will continue to work with our partners, such as the Town of Oakville and corporations, to plant trees in our community. But as Kathy Cavasalis said, mature trees have the greatest value. We will continue to support residents to plant the right tree in the right place. And yesterday, our tree sale ended. Our tree sale of native trees ended, which has been available to Oakville citizens. And actually, we've had sales in Milton and Georgetown, too. And we'll help residents steward trees on their property and in public spaces by providing tree planting advice, tree tending training and resources, and by offering native trees for sale every year. We continue to work toward implementing a subsidized tree planting program to further support residents to plant trees on private property. We've currently applied for a grant for a backyard tree planting program, and we hope we'll be successful this year. Protecting our current tree canopy is the other part of the equation, and this is dependent on you, our mayor and councillors, supporting the updated private tree protection bylaw 2017-038. Which is before council tonight. So I did also want to point out that the chart that Ms. Maynard posted earlier on in the evening, those trees that were removed, 6,300 trees, were healthy trees. These weren't dead trees, these weren't dying trees, these weren't damaged trees. These were healthy trees. So one has to wonder why they were being removed. So that is, I think, a continuing question. I think we talk about numbers all the time when we talk about diameter at breast height, and we banty these numbers around, but I want to show you a tree, 76 centimeters diameter, is that wide. So imagine how many people it would take to put their arms around that tree. My guess is it was probably a maple or an oak that was probably 100 to 150 years old and maybe more. So these are old trees in our community. And it doesn't mean that they're about to die either. 130 of these 76 centimeter trees were removed in a 4-year period, so probably more on either side of that. So we only have 1% of our canopy, or 2,000 trees, that are of that diameter. So we're taking away these very large, valuable trees when they're healthy and don't need to be removed. Can we restart the clock? Could I have my, could I speak now since I've spoken on behalf of?
Oh, I didn't realize, she wasn't a, I took her for Oakville Green and you for Oakville Green, but I realized that she wasn't a registered delegation. Can you finish in the time allotted, please?
I will try, certainly. Oakville Green, I should have started with this first maybe. I'm representing Oakville Green and its members tonight. Oakville Green is a longtime community group dedicated to protecting and enhancing trees and green space in Oakville. And I want to express our gratitude to staff, in particular Darnell Lambert and Chris Mark and Jalil Hashemi, who have spent 3 years, I'll count, and countless hours to hear from those in the community about tree protection. And they've been very wonderful about listening to our concerns and recommendations. We knew when this bylaw was passed in 2008 that it was going to be up for review in 5 years. So in fact, we were meeting with residents associations in 2013. In January 2014, Oakville Green submitted recommendations to the town signed by 8 other residents' associations. And after several meetings and discussions, our collective group shared nothing but extreme concern about continued tree loss in our neighborhoods. And I've already said that, of course, Oakville Green supports the changes to the private tree bylaw. The proposed changes, we feel, will make the tree bylaw much easier to understand. When you've got a measurement, 10 centimeters, replace it with a tree. That's great. And I think it's going to protect a lot of the trees that we're losing at a rapid rate, the free trees that we were losing. So by protecting trees over 15 centimeters DBH, I think that's a big help. And we commend the town for tracking the tree removal data. I think that was the whole idea of instituting this bylaw. We didn't have one before. Let's start with something and let's track the data. And it was scary what was found. I think the town realized in 2011, after only 3 years, that something was wrong. There was trouble in paradise. So the measurement that the town did and the stats that they took between 2012 and 2016, that chart that you saw earlier, was, I think, a real wake-up call for the town and for all of us. When we realized that just in that 4-year period that we had lost 1% of the canopy, or 20,000 trees. If you only have 2 million trees and you lose 20,000, that's a problem. I know that Mayor Burton and the council are committed to a target of 40% tree canopy cover, but right now Oakville only has 27.8% canopy cover, and unfortunately 10% of this is the invasive buckthorn that Kathy mentioned earlier. So we got a lot of catching up to do. Oakville Green works hard alongside citizens and the town, and we've planted 20,000 trees since 2004, but we just cannot play catch up when as many of these large mature trees are coming down. So there are a lot of people on board to plant trees, but tree protection is still key. There was mention of the ecological services that were provided by our urban forest canopy, and Oakville actually quantified that last year. Our urban forest has a replacement value of $1 billion. So the value of the environmental services, which again, nobody seems to pay a lot of attention to, is $3 million. So, air quality, water quality, and all of those things. So I'm going to skip down. Stormwater runoff, all of that stuff. In Oakville alone, emerald ash borer is going to kill about 200,000 trees, 10% of our canopy. So that's something that we cannot control when we have invasive species like that. But one thing that is under our control is the private tree bylaw. It is one tool in the toolkit, and I think it is a very important tool.
Ms. Brock,
yes.
Thank you very much for your information. There are councillors with questions for you.
Okay.
Councillor Hutchins is first.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming out. I was interested to know, you had a tree sale, but you said that it just closed.
Yes.
What was the cost of the average cost of the trees that you were selling, and how high were they? Were they the sort of size that we're recommending that the people replace?
We were trying to keep it to 1 gallon and 2 gallon pots, so pots that somebody could put in the trunk of their car. Certainly in my van, I can get a 10-gallon pot, and I do whenever I can.
Okay. And do you have any comments on the costs that the town is proposing to charge for these?
I think it is very reasonable, and I think when you look at the ecological value, there are actually tree value calculators that you can plug in, the width of the tree, the type of the tree, and that type of thing. You can plug that into a calculator, and trees are often worth, you know, a small tree could be worth $8,000 because of the ecological value that it's providing. So I think, frankly, it's a real bargain if people are only going to pay $300 per tree for replacement. I agree with Mr. Laughlin that I think it stops to make people think. And sometimes it's not like painting your front door a different color or changing the look of your living room and buying new furniture. This is a community asset, and I think it's very important that we see it as a value.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. I'm curious about your thoughts as to including an exemption for invasive tree removal. How would you feel about that?
I think we've got to get rid of that buckthorn, because what it does is it also exudes a chemical through its roots that kills a lot of the native species that we know do like to live here. So
you would not be against that? Like we just said at the Burl Oak Waterfront Park, removed a bunch of Siberian elms and Norwegian elms because they are very invasive. So that would be acceptable to Oakville Green?
I think the question that you're asking is one that's debated by urban foresters all over the place, and I think you'd have a different question, a different answer depending on who you asked. I think sometimes we have to balance, you know, privacy and canopy cover. Obviously, it's very expensive if we level all of this stuff. Unfortunately, Emerald Ash Borer did it for us, and because the trees were dead and had to be cut down, in some places, and certainly in the ravine and behind my 30-year-old neighborhood, it looks like bomb hit it. But knowing that there is a long-term plan, and I think that's what reassures me, is that we're working with the town on a biodiversity plan and an urban forest strategy south of Highway 5. So I think it'll be a project that'll go beyond my lifetime. But I think we have to have a strategy and realizing the issues with invasive species. How do we deal with those, as well as encouraging planting native trees?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Other questions for Ms. Brock? I have one. Mrs. Brock, would Oakville Green like to participate in consultations with the town on future changes, assuming this bylaw were to be passed tonight, future changes dealing with invasive species?
Absolutely, and we already have been in conversation with the town and already have a stewardship program where we're removing buckthorn and garlic mustard.
So your suggestion would be that we do need to move to create an invasive species approach?
Yes, yep, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Now we've got a question from Councillor Grant.
I would just like to add that I think it's great to have Oakville Green involved, but I certainly would not want to ignore the fact that the landscapers should probably have some part of that process too.
Oh, I must have failed to say as part of a public consultation, but that's certainly what I meant. So have no fear on that score. This council has a solid record of trying to consult everybody in the public, and I'm very proud of your record in that, Council. Thank you, Ms. Brock, for your information.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, does that complete the delegations? Thank you. All right, Council, that brings you and us to the standing committees. And the standing committees reports are the Community Services Committee report of April 24th and the Administrative Services Committee report of April 24th. Councillor Dudek?
Sorry, Your Worship. Just wondered when we'd have an opportunity do we separate M5 from the CSC in order to be able to ask questions of staff?
This is indeed your opportunity to do that, and I will take it that you have asked to separate item 5 on community services.
Thank you.
I wonder if someone would like to separate item 7 to facilitate a separate vote, given the conflict of Councillor Knoll. Councillor Adams, thank you. Are there any other separations? Is there a mover and seconder for the balance of the reports? Councillor Dudek and Councillor O'Meara, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that brings us to item 5. Councillor Dudek, did you want to lead off with questions?
Thank you.
Or should I start at the end of the table? Councillor O'Meara, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Thanks very much. So I'm wondering if staff might clarify a couple things for me. I always get nervous when I hear one side of a group saying we weren't consulted, and then I hear the other group saying, yes, we were consulted and it happened. And I'm wondering how that disconnect happened, or where an individual who's actually done work for the town feels that he wasn't asked his opinion on this proposed tree bylaw. Wondering if I could maybe just get some clarification on that. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Burton. We have been working on this bylaw and consulting with this bylaw since 2014. There have been public open houses. There has been email addresses that people can put comments forward to. We have met with numerous resident associations in the last 2 to 3 years. A number of arborists, if you're speaking arborists directly, actually did attend the original open houses we had back in 2014. Anybody who signed up to those open houses or had sent us a communication or correspondence was recontacted again when the reports were coming forward, so that they'd have an opportunity to come back again and voice any concerns. So we even had residents associations who did surveys of their communities to get further feedback on the bylaw. So I would stand before you and say that I think we have done a very thorough consultation process on the bylaw, and those who chose to participate, I think, did participate.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. So then why are we going and having a meeting with the arborists after this bylaw is passed?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that meeting is related to licensing and the licensing of arborists. If issues related to the bylaw are suggested at that meeting, we're happy to take that feedback. However, the meeting in May is related to licensing of arborists, not the contents of the bylaw specifically.
Okay, thank you. My next question has to do, I get where the mayor was going with looking at an invasive species policy, but if there is an invasive tree on an individual's private property, why would we not want that to be removed?
Right now, we have limited the invasive species within the bylaw to European buckthorn, which is one of the largest invasive species that we have within the town. Has been commented tonight on numerous occasions. It's now 10% of our urban forest based on our canopy study that we've recently done. There will be a debate amongst arborists, as was mentioned, I think just a few minutes ago, about what is an invasive species. I would suggest to you Norway maple, as opposed to, in accordance with Conservation Halton, would be an invasive species. And it is an invasive species, but I would not suggest that we would want to see all the Norway maples cut down in this town simply because they're an invasive species. They are an invasive species in a woodland area, but as a town street tree, don't see any reason why that tree should not remain. Manitoba maple might be considered an invasive species. Some consider it a weed tree. Tree of heaven might be considered a weed species. But again, these trees are all part of our ecosystem, and I don't believe they are, quote, invasive to the point where they are overrunning the entire community like European buckthorn is. I would suggest to you that in a review of the bylaw, as we further consult on the bylaw and we do a biodiversity strategy that's been discussed here this evening, we may come back to council with other invasive species that we think should be included in the bylaw, because that's the right thing to do. But until we do that overall biodiversity strategy, invasive species, Mayor Burton, will be included within that discussion. At that time, I think it would be appropriate to come back and recommend to you further species that are invasive at the time, but not right now.
Perfect, thank you for that. the way that I was reading sort of the enforcement, but the permitting process of this, and it sounds like there may be a bit of a disconnect, and I think it actually tailors a little closer to the Ottawa model, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but there will be some latitude for our town arborists when inspecting a tree to decide upon the health of that tree and therefore what is needed as a recourse. Am I correct or am I not?
Through you, Mayor Burton, you're absolutely correct. When the bylaw was first brought in 2008, we did actually establish what we call a criteria and indicators model, and I don't know of any other municipality that uses that today. It sounds like in Ottawa it's quite vague in terms of how they determine the health and a permit requirement for a tree. But we have a number of items that we do look at the tree in terms of its health, its overall structural integrity, the species of the tree, because we would rate a white oak different than we would a Manitoba maple, as an example. There's a number of issues that we look at to determine the value rating for a tree, and we call that a criteria as an indicator, which ultimately turns into a value and a score, which determines whether or not that tree would receive a permit as approved, a permit denied, or a permit with conditions.
And then that would factor into tree replacement, cash in lieu, that would all sort of, there would be a scale there. So it's not necessarily the $10,000 every single time if a tree's half dead or if it's there's going to be that subjectivity in our permitting process. Is that correct?
Completely, and I will again reinforce to council this evening, and for those who are watching, there is no permit fee for a dead or a hazardous tree. There was a bit of confusion, I think, the other night at a couple of points in time. You are going to be required an inspection, but there will be no permit fee associated with an EAB, dead, or a hazardous tree. And the other thing I'll comment is, in terms of a replacement tree, if you do replace trees on your property, it is not $300 a tree. It is the value of that tree that you can go and purchase at a local garden center.
Thank you very much, Mr. Markin, and for the staff and the work you guys did. I appreciate it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Delegate?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I guess some of the points Councillor O'Meara has already hit on. Do we have something when it's mentioned financial hardship? What is the criteria for that? Is it based on income? Is it based on the size of the property and how many trees have to be addressed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have not come across that in the time the bylaw has been in place since 2008. I would suggest to you that we would use the same criteria that we would use, for example, our parks, our recreation and culture programs, where people do have economic hardship and they do come in with documents that they obtain, I think, probably from the region. We would certainly entertain that type of transparency and that sort of similar hardship in terms of a tree permit cost.
And I thought it was a valid point, the issue of the measurements in terms of metric and that. Yeah. Are we providing both so that it's easily understood for a person?
Certainly, yes, certainly we can, and we can make that available on the website.
Okay. Also, species, are we, and I know we were talking about invasive, but is there any regard for, and it was raised earlier tonight, fast-growing species? In other words, if somebody made the mistake of planting something that was extremely fast-growing, and so the time period doesn't come into play, it's the type of tree. Is there any factor with that?
We've not really entertained species in terms of growth rate and growth rate models in terms of species. We haven't considered that at all. I think it's something that we'll certainly look at based on what's been discussed here this evening. We do have a recommendation this evening that we do report back in 12 to 18 months with metrics on the bylaw. So we would certainly consider that in terms of the data that we're going to be gathering.
Okay, I had heard from some other members of council that there was some discussion about us evaluating or assessing this bylaw earlier than the 12 to 18 months. Is that something separate than you're talking criteria? And the other was in regards to how this permitting process is working and the hardships that might be experienced by people?
we've not made any differentiation in terms of that aspect of coming back. If council wishes us to come back sooner, based on other criteria and metrics, we can certainly do that.
And did we ever give any regard in terms of the coverage on a person's property, i.e. if they've already got a generous canopy cover, does that factor into it? Because I know with a considerable amount of homes south of the QE, older mature properties that it was mentioned somebody planted it 30 years ago, they already have a generous tree canopy. Is there any regard for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Point 2 on our criteria indicators talks about the existing canopy coverage on the lot following removal of the tree, so that is included in the calculation.
Thank you. Did we ever also look in terms of, and I know it would be kind of hard to track, but I know there's a lot of residents I've spoken to who have been very good about planting trees over time, and they've got a very mature property. And so they're already concerned about the fact that if a tree has to come down, not because it's hazardous, but say it's too close to the house and they're concerned about it falling on the house. Is that considered a safety issue versus hazardous?
That again is part of the criteria and indicators that we look at in terms of a tree that might be too close to a building, a tree roots that might be covered in asphalt. We look at a host of issues related to the tree in context, the tree in terms of the target, if the tree does fail. There's at least a dozen points here that we do go over with, so Councillor Dudek, we have considered that aspect as well.
Thank you. And also, did we give any consideration for incentive programs in terms, because I know it's been raised a couple of times by people that they foresee this as being punitive, but they don't see the other side being an incentive program to encourage people to do things.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Dudek. That has been discussed in the past, and that will be covered off within our Urban Forest Strategic Management Plan that we're embarking on hopefully after this bylaw is considered.
Okay, so the other thing is the fees. Like you're talking the first tree, $50 for the permit, and anything after that is $325. Now, is that based on a cost recovery, or is that based on an incentive to maintain or retain the trees?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the costs are based on the council-approved user fee policies in terms of us determining the cost of the permit. It does include corporate overhead as well, and it does include basically the time to process the permit. I will say that we do see at $325, it does get people maybe to think twice, and that's really what we're looking for. This bylaw is really all about canopy conservation. And when we go out and meet with people, because that's also why we like the permit, because it forces us to go out and actually talk to people. We hope to consult with them, and they may not decide to take down that tree based on the consultation with us, and the fee being the fee what it is today, or proposed.
Thank you. And my final question, twofold, I think would be best addressed by the Commissioner of Planning. And it pertains to the development aspect. And I know this seems to be the crux of what many of us have a problem with, is people coming in, and it was raised tonight, that if the building footprint is such that the tree is in the middle of the, and our zoning requirements stipulate they can have this setback and that setback. So basically, they're permitted to remove the tree based on a development, correct? Do we also, and it was raised, I believe, by my colleague across the way, in regards to a cost of replacing that tree, even though it's got to come down, is there a cost factor that similar to what we're asking private homeowners to do?
First of all, there is a site plan process, which I think, through you, Mr. Mayor, that Councillor Grant had referred to, which we do try and replace the trees on the property and try to achieve a canopy target similar to what we apply in North Oakville. And that's the benefit of doing the South Oakville urban strategy, is to really understand what is that canopy cover we have to do on each one of the lots. So site plan is the first opportunity for us to replace. So there wouldn't be a cost of the trees that come down on those sites, but there certainly is a cost in order to replant them and do the landscaping plan as approved by site plan. The other category are the single-family lots, for example, where you may be putting up a house that's permitted by zoning. So you have a right or an as-of-right permission to put a house within that footprint. So the trees in that footprint can come out with no compensation. We are, though, looking at, through the Urban Forest Management Plan, when it's done for South Oakville, to look at the implications of how we could address those issues through a type of site plan approval, so that we could then look at, it's not necessarily a compensation for the trees to come out, but it is an enhanced landscaping in order to achieve that canopy cover on those lots.
Okay, so it is something that we're looking at incorporating at a further process, is what you're saying, for replanting or costs associated with that.
Yes, it is, and a big factor in that is completing that urban forest management plan for South Oakville, so that we have the evidence basis as which to require those provisions through site plan.
And I know we've been talking on another track about the site plan process and all the development aspects associated with it. My concern is not every development is site plan, a site plan candidate, put it that way. And so we may have even more falling through the cracks as a result, unless we have each development having to go through a site plan process to encourage or work with planning staff in regards to, you know, putting a driveway somewhere versus where it is right now so that it can retain a tree. Is there any consideration for that, for site plan going forward, so that we're casting a broader net, so to speak?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there is that provision, and the basis in which, for the two studies that we're doing, which will give us the basis for understanding what are the provisions we can build into site plan on a more variety of properties, is the stormwater management plan that needs to be done. That deals with drainage issues, which we can then deal with through site plan on more properties. And the second is the urban forest management plan. So the purpose of those two studies is actually to give us a foundation in order to look at it at site plan, not only for the properties that are subject to site plan now, but potentially looking at least for council's consideration, extending some of those provisions.
Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Dudek, for allowing me to cross off most of my questions. Mr. Mark, you talked about the Manitoba maple and Norway maple as being invasive species, and those aren't two species that you're looking at permitting to be removed in the same light as European buckthorn or ash trees, because if they aren't dead, they're going to be soon, is my guess. Could you just flesh that out a little bit? If it's an invasive species, why don't you want to see those coming down?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, possibly our manager of forestry can give us a little more background in terms of the populations, but within the town, we will have significant populations of Manitoba maple, of Norway maple, that do make up a very large component of our canopy. The reason that buckthorn is on our radar so quickly right now is because of the volume of ash trees that are being removed across the town. And that sunlight that is now penetrating woodlots is making buckthorn just absolutely explode in terms of population. It is number one on our hit list, if you will, so that's the reason that we have included it within the bylaw, that it does not require a permit or require a permit fee nor replacement for it.
All right, and so while we would appreciate residents making use of native species, they're going to do far better than any of these others. We'll continue to coach them and bring them up to date on the benefits of that.
Absolutely, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think, again, that's part of the beauty of the consultation that we're doing and going out and speaking with people directly one-on-one is actually giving them that kind of advice to plant native species, planting that tree in the right spot so that the tree doesn't become a problem 15, 20, 25 years from then.
And quick comment on European buckthorn. I take it there's a concern when people go out with a saw and remove it on their own?
What I would be concerned about is going out and cutting it. You should, well, in our case, we are treating that buckthorn because if you just cut it off, it will resprout again. So right now we are out there and we are actually treating that buckthorn with a chemical to kill the buckthorn. I would say to you, I guess the other issue that I would have with people just going out and cutting it down is the sanitation, that they would go and possibly cut another tree or another piece of vegetation with the buckthorn still on that saw. So that's my concerns with people going out and just cutting buckthorn, besides just the safety implications along with that as well.
Although being on the side of a Ms. Brock, an extractigator or whatever that cruel piece of equipment is, that is not without its hazards as well in the warm weather. Commissioner Closey, you mentioned in response to Councillor Duddick's question about trees being removed during construction, a demolition and a rebuilding. My primary concern, Southeast Oakville, receive a number of calls on a regular basis. The way we have it worded, the bylaw maintains an exemption for tree removal. Just if we could be a little clearer on that, the latter part of that on page 9, makes it clear that under the Planning Act, if the home is able to be built, if it's zoned for that area, they can come down without no harm, no foul. Just, I think we have to continually remind residents, because they look at that as a weakness in the private tree protection bylaw. So just leave that for you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hutchins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, there's still, I think, confusion out there on how fast the inspections can be made to happen. There's some, may I say, doubt that it can be accomplished in 5 days. And also there's confusion on a hazardous tree and one with imminent failure, and who's determining which, and which can come down immediately, and so on. As I understand it, imminent failure is something that is leaning, it's going to fall. It can be taken down immediately, but whoever takes it down in the arborist has to prove subsequently to the town that it was imminent. Is that correct?
Mayor, that is correct.
Would you like to, could you expand a little bit
Sure.
on the differences between the two things? Because I think it would help the public to understand that too.
So within the bylaw, before council this evening, we made a distinction between high-risk trees and emergency work, as we're calling it, or trees that have imminent failure. Right now, under the current bylaw, if a tree is deemed to be hazardous by a certified arborist, that tree can be removed and the town can be notified as soon as practical after the fact. In our review of the number of trees that have come down over the life of the bylaw, we believe that there's a number of hazardous trees that have been deemed to be hazardous to come down that is far, far in excess of what the town deems to be hazardous trees over the same period of time. On average, we remove around 55 hazardous trees per year. That's hazardous trees. That's not imminent hazardous, but that's just hazardous. Over the period that we looked at the bylaw, there was almost close to 300 trees within the private sector that were deemed to be hazardous that came down in 1 year. So what we've done in this bylaw, we have separated high risk and imminent failure trees or emergency work. So under imminent failure or emergency work, we have left that in the bylaw that an arborist or even a homeowner, if they have a cracked tree or a tree that is about to imminently fail, that tree can still be removed. However, the town is looking for some documentation as soon as practical after the fact. That could be photographs proving that that tree was imminently about to fail. A high-risk tree is a hazardous tree, but it is not imminently about to fail. And I would suggest to you that we have a number of trees on the town road allowance that are marked with an X that are hazardous trees, because we only cut down trees that are hazardous rated. And those trees stand for sometimes several months, up to 6 to 8 months. So in this bylaw, we have identified a high-risk tree that is hazardous but not about to fail and no immediate target. We have committed through the bylaw that we will be out within 5 business days if a homeowner or an arborist fills out a permit that says that tree is a high-risk tree. And I'm confident that we're going to achieve that key performance indicator.
That's terrific. Okay, and registration. I mean, we do require other industries to be regulated and registered. So having the arborists in the town, registration is not unusual. And how will that help the town and them and so on?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we feel licensing of arborists is appropriate. We do license pool contractors, fence contractors, landscapers. In a lot of cases, that's making sure that these business people operating with the town are operating in an ethical manner. Arborists are not governed by a provincial body, so we feel this is one way that if there are poor performers within the industry, that license could be revoked if that is required. I'm not saying here this evening that we have a plethora of arborists out there who are operating in an unethical manner. We have lots of arborists in this town, some who spoke this evening, who operate very, very excellent business, prune trees and remove trees completely in accordance with the International Society of Arboriculture standards. But we feel that this bylaw is all about canopy conservation. And I think if we're going to truly take seriously canopy conservation, then we should be licensing arborists so they have another stake in the game, so to speak. And then we feel that it gives an added layer of protection to the town's tree canopy when arborists are licensed.
Okay, is there any other way we can sort of back up the arborists as well to help them further to become, I mean, I guess the registration is like a certification in a way. That will operate to weed out those that are unethical or those that are deciding that the imminent demise of a tree needs to be cut down when in fact that doesn't happen. How are we going to tell after the fact that once a tree's come down whether it needed to come down? I mean, pictures, I guess if it's cracked, that's pretty obvious, but if there isn't a crack, pictures of the rotten wood when they cut it open and that sort of thing?
Certainly, if there's cracked, that's obviously indicated in a crack of a tree. If the tree is that about to fail, if that tree is degraded with internal rot, we would hope to see pictures of that. Again, this is something I think we're going to be looking at and assessing over the first year when we do report back to council, what type of information we are getting back from arborists when they do take down a tree that is apparently imminent failure. So we'll be coming back with further information to council on that.
May I suggest that might be one of the areas that we have a very fruitful discussion, no pun intended, but with the arborists to find out what they think is appropriate and what we think is appropriate in that sort of way. I was also very impressed with the Oakville Greens tree sale. And I know we do facilitate sales of rain barrels come springtime every year. Is there a way that we could be helpful in acquiring trees, maybe have a tree sale which the town could put on that would be, we could suggest the sort of species that need to be planted and also help out with the costs for doing that.
Through you, Mayor Burton, certainly on our website, we do indicate native species trees and recommend trees that that can be planted and should be planted in this climate, in this hardiness zone. What you're suggesting in terms of a tree sale or tree discount, I think that's all part of that advocacy program that Councillor Duddick had mentioned that I suggest is going to come back as part of our urban forest management plan. And because again, we want to grow the canopy. We want to get to 40%, and it's not going to get done based on just the town doing it by itself. It's really going to involve the entire community. That's why I think we have to have a really healthy advocacy program, and we're going to outline that in the urban forest management plan that's going to come back to council later this year or early in 2018.
Okay, but do we have anything going along we're 150 years old this year. I kind of like the suggestions of getting the scouts and everybody involved in planting trees and so on.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I can tell you our tree planting program that we do work with Oakville Green and other associations, we normally have about 5 events per year. We're up to 15 right now in 2017. So we have basically tripled our tree planting program with Oakville Green this year. There's a tremendous amount of trees that are going to be planted over the next number of months. But in order to some kind of a special Canada 150 program, we have not budgeted for anything of that nature. But I can tell you we have really ramped up our efforts in tree planting, and a lot of that credit goes to Oakville Green and our partnership with them.
Absolutely. That's all I have at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ilger.
Thank you. A lot of questions have been answered, but there's one I'd like to clarify before I go on, and that is, I think Councillor Duddick was surprised because she thought something was coming back in the short term 7 months instead of the 12 to 18 months. And in fact, there is something coming back with regard to the 7 months, and that's what is part of number 4 in a recommendation, and it has to do with staff reporting back in the third quarter of 2017 on the removal of trees covered under the emergency work. We want to see that's what's coming back within the 7 months that staff have committed to, because initially we wanted to put that in effect today. But on the urban forestry plan, so we are right now at 27.8%, 10% are buckthorn, so really it's 17.8% canopy cover if you exclude the buckthorn, which should be excluded anyway. Is that really, have I got the right numbers?
I'm not sure it can be actually calculated that. Maybe I'll ask Mr. Hashemi, who did the iTree study, to comment on that.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. That 197,000 trees is the number, is approximately 10% of the number, not 10% of the canopy. They are smaller. One tree doesn't have an average size of the tree canopy. So we means the profession, doesn't have the ability to differentiate canopy based on a species. Our canopy cover is based on 2,800 sample plot with 48% reliability, which is high in remote sensing. And that the technology at the moment doesn't have the capability to go down to the species level, because it's all, if you know the GIS, it's all the reflection of the light density when you are interpreting the species, and it's difficult. So we don't know what percentage is that 197, but I can tell you that absolutely is not 10%. A very rough estimation, it might be between 2 to 3%, but Ms. Karen Brock is right in terms of the number of stems are 10%.
Okay, that's good to know, because I was thinking, wait a minute, we're in way worse shape than I thought we were. Urban tree canopy is used by everyone now in an urban area, but it used to be interior forest habitat. What is our true interior forest habitat percentage? Or is it so low we don't know?
To you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the simple answer is it was not a part of the study, the urban forest study or the iTree study. Interior does have a definition based on the buffer, and it's easy to include that, but it's not in an urbanized environment. It's not significant because of the size of every woodland. We might have some interior in some of the larger tract of woodland like Iroquois shoreline. We and many other municipalities, we almost lost our forest interior based on the definition that Ministry of Natural Resources in Ontario have for the definition of that, the size and the proximity of other land uses, commercial and residential.
No, I appreciate that, which is really where you get all the birds and all the different species, and I realize that is going to be gone, or it is gone. Now, with regard to the Planning Act, the development application comes in, the tree bylaw shield is lifted, correct?
The development does have, to you, Mr. Mayor, the development does have a wide, interpretation. Site alteration also can be and will be considered as development, which someone is renovating or putting a pool. That is covered. Whatever is under site alteration are covered under private tree bylaw. Site plan, under the definition of the site plan within existing bylaw, are exempt, but as Commissioner Cloutey mentioned, they are under another piece of regulation, which is site plan bylaw. The building footprint are exempt from both.
Right, but if I go north of Dundas, where an application comes in to plant 1,000 houses on an acreage, the tree bylaw is still in effect? No, I know. I just want to make sure that people understand what is and what isn't included.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if you use that example in North Oakville, for example, if an application comes in, it would normally be a planning application with a zoning and a subdivision approval. So the tree bylaw applies until such time as those provisions then are in place. And those provisions, there's council has adopted a similar type of process to identify the trees that will be protected and to identify the landscaping plan that it's put back. But it's put in place through the subdivision conditions, not through the application of a private tree bylaw.
Yeah, I was actually shocked with the 6,300 trees, saying 70% are actually on private property. If you drive along Dundas and look north over the last few years in the period you're using, all I could see were bulldozed trees flattened, but it's still that small a number compared to the rest of Oakville. And we're accurate on that number, are we? Wow, that's really scary than what's happening in the rest of Oakville. Appreciate that. Will you be coming back, looking later in the next, I know you're doing the metrics, but regarding something to do with the cedar hedge? With that example, I'm thinking, will we look at that going forward, perhaps?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the cedar hedge, the arborists and professionals are aware of the species rating. It does have such a low species rating that if you put in that formula, it may end up with permit granted without condition. So we do consider species like poplar species, Siberian elm. They are the species with 39%, 40% species rating based on International Society of Arboriculture species rating. So if we put that in the formula, the result, the outcome might be permit granted without condition. We do consider them in the calculation.
Okay, so I guess the one picture of that was shown to us tonight, where you have a row of cedars that they're not I don't know whether they're even 15 centimeters, but they are tall. But that's what happens when you plant them too close together. So would the calculations based on what we passed tonight be in effect, or you do some other calculation on that?
The calculation is based on single tree. If they are over 15 centimeters, goes to that criteria indicator, and the outcome will be similar. But if you are asking about permit fee,
right?
Okay, permit fee, we calculated permit fee based on the cost involved in consultation, doing criteria and indicator for single tree in a single lot. So in 12 to 18 months, we should come back when we do have the available data. If there are two trees in the same lot, we are going to spend less time, then we have to review that, come up with the permit fee, what we do have for those cases. Because we don't have that case now and notification forms and trees covered under notification are not being reviewed or inspected, we don't have that number. So again, the calculation is based on a single tree removal application for a single lot.
Okay, I guess I was thinking of where you referred to that, it was 33 trees at $325 each. We will look at that going forward with our bylaw?
If each stems are over 15 centimeters, yes.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for all the work, and I know it's been a few years, so, and we're not, I don't think we're done yet, so thanks very much.
Councillor Adams?
Can staff just show us where the fee is for compensation? So in a case where a tree is not being replanted on a lot, where is it showing up the fee that we would charge? And what's the procedure for determining how does a owner of a property know that they're going to have to pay a fee versus replant? What's that procedure look like? And I know we've kind of gone around this a few times, but.
So if the homeowner cannot plant a tree on their property, they would make a contribution to the tree replacement planting fund. And we have valued that tree to be $300.
And how do we evaluate? How do we choose 300?
That is based on approximately the cost right now of our tendered price for planting trees, 60 mil tree, $300.
And how does the public get to say that that's a fair price? Does it come through a procedure? How does it get set formally?
My suggestion is we have set the price, and we would include that in our annual rates and fees guide.
Okay.
And should people want to question that or come forward to council saying that's too high, that would be, in my opinion, through you, Mr. Mayor, the opportunity to come and have that discussion.
So the first formal setting of that would happen later this year?
That's correct.
Okay, and in the interim?
In the interim, I would suggest if there is concern, we would bring those concerns back to council when we report back next time.
Thank you.
Councillor Lischina?
Since I'm last on the, in line here, a lot of my questions have been answered, so thank you, everyone. I do want to say to Mr. Mark and his team that this is a very comprehensive report, and I wasn't here for all those years when the back and forth was happening with the open houses, but given in the last 2 years, I've seen the effort that staff make in having open houses and informing residents. So I think that there is ample opportunity for resident input. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll?
Thank you. Very briefly, like Councillor Lischina, all my questions have been thoroughly prosecuted. The only one I have is just came out of a question that Councillor Adams had, and that's with respect to the $300 fee, the tree in lieu or cash in lieu of tree fee. What would that be if somebody were to have to do that themselves? What would the comparable cost be? So if it's $300 contribution based on our tendered cost of buying a lot of trees, if Joe Smith had to go out and replace a tree of similar size, et cetera, that you used for your tender document, what would that be on the market?
On the market, a wire basket tree at $300 that we would pay for would probably be well in excess of $300, if not up around $400 to $500.
There is a fairly substantial discount based on the value that we are able to, or the price we're able to negotiate.
Through your Mayor Burton, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, thank you, Council and the public, for all the information that you've brought forward. As mayor, I'm going to suggest that we have a recorded vote on this. I'm also going to give a bit of a mea culpa. I know that council was very kind a few years ago when I suggested that we should wait to toughen the private tree bylaw, because it appeared at the last moment, at that time, it appeared that the last 1 year's worth of data suggested that we might be gaining on the problem, and I didn't want to do more than we needed to do. And so I thank Council for having granted that delay and engaged in the resulting several years of additional study. I think we've got a stronger bylaw as a result, and we have a much stronger case for it. It's persuaded me that we do need to do more, as proposed in the bylaw here. And so my hat's off to all of you for your continued support for the private tree protection bylaw. I have been struck, I've been to many residents associations membership meetings over the last 3 years in which it always comes up that they want the private tree protection bylaw strengthened, and they believe that there need to be much stronger protections. And so I will be supporting this, and I thank you all for your persistence. Councillor Duddick.
Are we speaking to the motion at this current time?
Unless you do, I'm going to call the vote, so this would be a good time.
Thank you. I've had considerable concerns with the, what shall I say, the weight we're putting on the individual homeowner in terms of cost. And in many ways, I feel this is sort of a leap of faith to see how this goes, because at this point, as you pointed out, we've had so many residents crying foul about tree loss in the community. The problem I still have is that we're still not addressing the major component, which is the development aspect. And I know our hands are tied, but I think it's misleading to the community to give the impression that we're tightening that up, because we'll still get phone calls saying, okay, wait a minute, you just got this private tree bylaw, whether it be the Merton lands, whether it be whatever, all of a sudden they'll see the tree loss and say so much for the private tree bylaw. I was very pleased to hear that there is a reflection for the existing canopy cover on an individual's property, because again, as I stated earlier, where I happen to represent, they are very mature, well-treed lots, and we love them the way they are, but there does have to be a certain reflection for people who have planted trees and have cared for those trees over the lifetime of the ownership of the property. So as I say, I will support this in a leap of faith. I do have misgivings. I would ask if we could maybe make a concentrated effort to come back as early as possible. I would say a year is a good reflection of compiling data. I have a problem the more we kick it out. If there is a problem, we need to address that.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I took a lot of solace out of the comments that Mr. Mark made in terms of our arborists working with the permit holders, so that a lot of the concerns we heard from industry were absolute maximums were at rates 100% in each category, and that is really shouldn't be all the case, and there is flexibility there, and that subjectivity that going to be worked out as one of the recommendations was made earlier. So again, I'll support it as well with Councillor Duddick, and know that our staff want to do the right thing, as the arborist community wants to do the right thing here. And I think if the right people get together, then we get the right result. So thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you very much. I echo Councillor Duddick's comments, and I look forward to going back and going through my paperwork to see just how many 100 trees we're going to lose on Sawwet Golf Course. I think that was her point, and I think we really, as individuals in this town, have to take a look at development applications a little more seriously going forward. Thank you. I will be supporting this, though.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Adams.
I'm certainly going to be supporting it. I do look forward to our staff providing some more details on some of the procedures that will go along with supporting it with respect to the tree removal permitting process. I think that some of that could be better defined for the residents so that they understand going in how they'll be treated as they come through the town with their permit process. So with that, of course, I'll certainly be supporting it.
All right. All we need is a mover and a seconder. Councillor Elgar, you had your hand up first. Councillor Grant, you won the foot race to be number 2. Madam Clerk, you've got that? All right, to register your support for the bylaw, please rise to be named. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Duddick, Councillor O'Meara, and Mayor Burton. There are no votes opposed. The motion is carried unanimously. I now need a mover and seconder for the for the item 7 of Administrative Services Committee, item number 7, Councillor Duddick and Councillor O'Meara. This is the item on which Councillor Knoll has declared a conflict, so he's pushed back from the table. And by a show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? Item 7 is carried. There are no consent items on our agenda, but there is a fairly important and I think strategically valuable item, only one item, in fact, under the discussion items, and that is the 2017-18 Strategic Plan priorities. And before we have a presentation on that, I would like to have a brief recess for biological purposes. And can we make that 5 minutes? Thank you. We are recessed. All right, thank you everyone for that brief recess, and the council is now back in session. And as I understand it, there's no need for a presentation given that the material is well publicized and council has studied it carefully. Are there any questions about item number 1? Is there a mover and seconder? Councillor Knoll and Councillor Elgar, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. There are no confidential discussion items listed for the agenda, no advisory committee minutes on this agenda. Your information items have been circulated electronically, and your status of outstanding issues likewise. Is there any new business, a notice of motion, emergency, congratulatory, or condolence matter? Seeing none, Madam Clerk. Are there any regional reports or questions regarding town boards and advisory committees? Seeing none, Madam Clerk. Are there any requests for reports? I'm not aware of any. I see none. Is there a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws? Councillor Duddick and Councillor Hutchins. All those in favor for the bylaws as listed in the agenda and with regard to 2017-38 as revised. All those in favor? Did I get a mover and seconder?
Yes.
All those in favor? It's funny how one little interruption can throw you right off. I declare the bylaws carried unanimously. That completes the work of our agenda, and you've been very generous with your time and attention, Council. It's been great working with you, and that ends our meeting.